Good day and welcome to Our Power is Within. I am your host, Chaz Smith, and I am on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. If you feel inspired to share this message, I would be forever grateful. Some simple ways to help me is by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or sharing your favorite episode on your social media and tagging me at Our Power is Within on Instagram. So 2021, huh? How is this new year treating you guys? Or should I say, how are you treating the new year? Has anyone done any reflections? I wrote a short blog about one of my favorite successes of 2020, aside from starting my podcast, of course. And it's actually all about my daily walking practice and the benefits that it brought me this year in so many ways. So if you want to check it out, you can find that on my blog, on my website at www.justchaz.com. As you will hear in just a little bit, my chat with Scott Robinson, our guest today for today's episode, we talk about the power of meditation. So our weekly challenge for this week is to commit to yourself 5 minutes each and every day of the week for a simple meditation of any kind that suits you. It could be 5 minutes of sitting there and noticing the sounds all around you without judgment. You could focus on your breath with each inhale and exhale. It could be a heart-centered, heart coherence meditation. And it could even just be a quick little guided meditation that you find for free on YouTube or Insight Timer. But just 5 minutes per day is all I ask for you to give yourself a gift of consistency. Each time you sit down and commit to those 5 minutes, you are telling your brain, hey brain, look at me. We're doing this. We're giving ourselves this gift. Yay, self-care. Yeah, it's something I do all the time. I constantly love to remind my brain to notice when I'm doing really kind, loving things for myself. It might sound corny, but it's a way that I get to celebrate. And because by nature, we're essentially all born with a brain that leans towards a negativity bias. So anytime that we can celebrate the good and notice and celebrate the wins and observe and acknowledge and show our brains, I think it's really powerful. So anyhow, as I've already mentioned, Scott is our guest today. Scott is otherwise very well known on Instagram as The.Brain.Guy with a period in between the brain and brain guy. Scott is constantly putting out some amazing, mind-blowing, inspiring, and empowering content on Instagram and Facebook. So I really encourage you guys to follow along with him. I mean, who doesn't really want to learn about how awesome our brains are, right? And as you will hear soon, we essentially have more than one brain. Okay, so we have like our brain, but as Scott explains, our heart is essentially its own brain and our gut has essentially its own brain as well. And the heart actually sends more messages and more signals to our brain than the other way around. Our heart is essentially the only organ or part of the body that does send indeed more messages to the brain rather than the reverse. So that's one of the reasons heart coherence meditation is particularly awesome. So a little about Scott. He started out as a professional athlete. He became a personal trainer and then he did rehab work, which was physiotherapy based. But intuitively, he felt that there was more to the big picture. And long story short, Scott went down a path of discovering the power of our brains and our capacity to experience miracles when we can get out of our own way and have two-way communication with our superconsciousness. Scott goes deep today into the power and awesomeness of our brain and how we are capable of stepping into the highest possible expressions of our true self. Something he actually said that resonates with me and that I feel like is the whole basis of our healing journeys is he said, get the old out of your way so you can go on with being your very best self. And who doesn't want to be their very best self, right? So let's go ahead and welcome Scott to the show so he can share with us some of his abundance of knowledge and wisdom. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
I'm really excited to get to chat with you today and then see what comes of this conversation for the listeners.
Yeah, well, look, same. I'm really excited about what you're doing, and as you said, allowing people a space to try and find their own power and give that back to them. That aligns perfectly with what I'm doing, and so I'm excited to share some stories and some information, and hopefully assist you in what you're doing, and hopefully that sparks healing and empowerment in maybe more than one individual. That'd be beautiful.
Absolutely. So I think just so that people kind of get a feel for who you are and what you're doing in this space, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what got you into studying the brain and the power that the brain has in our well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of got to take it back a long way because now anybody who starts a healing journey, you do self-work and you need to kind of go within and understand actually who you are. And so who I am is a healer, essentially, and that's something that was there right from the very beginning. I wasn't consciously aware of that, but the signs were there, the evidence was there, the language was all there ever since I was a really little kid. But I thought I was an athlete, and I went down that path, and that level of athletic application and dedication has really been a huge thing in my journey, because that's allowed me to be focused like an athlete and just sort of work in this space and keep working on myself and keep working on what I'm doing, and then things continue to evolve. And that is literally how I found the brain. I was a personal trainer, which is what I became once I retired from life as an athlete. And with that athletic mindset, you're always looking for the next thing. You're looking for the thing that's going to keep you in front of the field or give you an edge. And my thing was I wanted to be the best personal trainer. So I was doing a lot of rehabilitation work, and then I kind of became aware that just wasn't. It was all physiotherapy based, and I just became aware that it just wasn't as effective as I thought it could be. And I felt there was more. I was looking for that edge, and I quite literally saw a Facebook ad. This is 6 or 7 years ago now, and there was a couple of guys on this Facebook ad, and they were firing a reflex to make a pectoralis muscle, a chest muscle, become stronger. And that was mind-blowing to me at the time. It's incredibly simple now, but that was at the time, that was all kinds of light bulbs went off, and I felt like that's exactly what I'm looking for. It dawned on me that I was working with the periphery of the body in movement, just trying to get people to move arms and legs and trying to change what I realized was a centrally driven signal creating or maintaining dysfunction. And so when I saw that video, I realized, like, there's a central computer, and if I could communicate somehow with the central computer, or if I had access to the motherboard of switches, and I could just, if I knew what buttons to push and what switches to flick, then I could change the output, I could change the signal, maybe change the message in that central computer, and then that would change the dysfunction. And that's exactly what happened. And so I kind of dove into that rabbit hole and really haven't come up. So I became the brain guy. Because literally as soon as you start working with the brain, you realize that almost nobody else is on that level. And so people begin to see you as the brain guy, the person who actually knows what to do with the brain, how to fix things at that level. And so I was very, very fortunate and very, very blessed that I was never tied to a paradigm that made me or forced me to fit what I was seeing and all the information that I was gathering and evidencing with people in front of me. I was never forced to fit that information or those presentations inside a specific box. So I never had to sort of make things look a certain way. So in certain paradigms, you need to make your answer look a certain way for that answer to be viable. And science is our scientific paradigm is a little bit that way. That things need to have a physical explanation. And so we were just talking about this just before, in that our science kind of only sees the physical body, and medical science only sees the physical body, but there's just more. And that was the truth that I sort of fell into when I sort of dove down that rabbit hole looking at the brain. Was I was just always open to just looking for the truth, and what's the truth of this situation, what's the truth of the behind these symptoms, where's it all coming from? And if you're open to exploring and looking, well, then you'll just find that there's always more. And so with that thirst for exploration and that curiosity, all kinds of amazing things continued to unfold. And yeah, what I can do now is just a long way down the track from where it was when I started. And I think the name The.Brain.Guy is actually really right and really perfect, but for very, very different reasons. When I first sort of thought that was the name to go with, it was because I was working purely as an applied movement neurology practitioner, and I was working with brain and the neurology of the body, and so that name was right for that. But then as things evolved and there was just more and more, and it sort of you progressed into these other dimensions of the body, really the brain, as I think most people kind of see it, the brain is the bridge between the physical and the non-physical, the energetic or the spiritual, or however you want to call it and look at it. And so that's kind of where I get to exist. I get to be that bridge between science and spirit. And if I can bridge science and spirit, and I can speak a language that people can understand, because I can put things in neurophysiological terminology, and then people can accept that, and then I can help more individuals cross that bridge and actually discover their truth. And that's kind of really what we're all here to do, hopefully.
I love that. I love how you explain the brain as the bridge between physical and non-physical. It does remind me a little bit about, in a sense, the work that Joe Dispenza does with kind of bridging, like science and mysticism, like making mysticism, like showing it's actually scientific in a sense.
Yeah. It's just how much science is prepared to look at it, and how open true science looks at these things and looks for truth. There's a guy by the name of Dr. John DeMartini, and I quote him all the time on this.
Love
because
him.
Yeah, so his words, look, true science I'm on board with, fake science I have absolutely no time for. And he'd say, like, true religion, he's on board with, and religion for the masses, not on board with at all. But his words were that true science and true religion are trying to say the same thing. And there's just different languages around it, but they're trying to say the same thing. And I didn't fully understand that the first time I heard it, but it's very, very, very true.
It is. It's funny because it's so true. And what happens is the fake science and the fake religion is what has created the disparity or the fight between the two, as if it's either or, and rather than like you're saying, a bridge, or it's and both, it's this and that. And so it reminds me of actually something I heard this man say just today. He was talking about common sense and leading into what is truth. And he said, truth is what you get down to when you peel back all the layers of all the shit you thought you learned.
Yes,
it's like, I like that.
Yeah, and you're touching on something there that I have come to explain in nearly every single session that I do with people. So when we peel all that stuff back, there's literally miracles available for each of us. And I would say, and I say this all the time, I literally see miracles in every single session with people. And the only time I don't get to see miracles is when people kind of block it, because they just can't tolerate that level of positive. They can't tolerate that level of benefit, because that's going to shift their reality or their belief system just too much, and their brain just can't allow that. Or we're shifting things, we're unlocking something that seems small, but it's going to facilitate a massive change for us, down the track. But generally, miracles are absolutely available to us kind of all the time. And really, when we peel back those layers of falseness, and I would call that false consciousness. And the truth of the matter is that our civilization is actually built on a level of false consciousness, and so we are kind of swimming in a soup of limiting beliefs, and we grow up with them, and life doesn't need to be that way. So we grow up with these limiting beliefs around life needs to be hard, life needs to be challenging, like there needs to be suffering, or there needs to be pain, or there needs to be hardship between you and a good result. And there's all these levels of limiting beliefs that we're subjected to, and we just download them as kids from our parents and from those around us without question. And we look around us and everybody's living the same life. So we take that as truth. But when we begin to strip it back and we align ourselves with whatever the universal truth is, so whatever the actual truth in the universe is, then things begin to change, and I get to see that, and that's an amazing thing. So I explain it to people in this context, and this is, we're just going to dive straight into this. This is kind of going from zero to boom in terms of crossing that bridge between science and spirit. But we can say if there's one consciousness, there's one universal mind, there's one consciousness in the universe, then there's kind of, with relative to truth, there's kind of two big moments in eternity. And we could say that there was a time when there was only consciousness, and when there was only consciousness, then consciousness just was whatever it was. There was nothing to misinterpret it, nothing to perceive it any different way. It just was whatever it was, and that was truth. And then at some point, consciousness began to assert itself. And then at some point down the track, there was humanity. And then we've got our own individuated consciousnesses, and we're able to perceive, and we're able to try and understand things. And so we perceive things our own way, and we come up with our own truths. So if I'm Sir Isaac Newton and I'm lying under a tree and an apple falls and hits me on the head, I look at that and think, okay, how did that happen? Like when I come up with a theory for gravity, and then I measure it, and it's 9.8 meters per second, and then I run all kinds of checks and balances around that, and I make that fit within the scientific paradigm that I've set up, and it all holds up, and it looks great, and it looks true, and it's perfect, and so we accept that as a law for gravity. Now, that fits perfectly with our understanding, and we all accept it. But then I just say to people, well, is that actually what is happening, or is there some overarching other truth to the universe that just explains that more completely? And I would just say, I don't know. I'm not here to tell you that there is or there isn't. I'm just highlighting that it's an interpretation. We've just come up with our own interpretation, and we have no guarantees over whether that is actually true or whether it's just a perception. So when we sort of look at things like that, then we can say, okay, well then let's allow some of these other layers to go peeling back, and let's just explore what is. And when we do that, the higher intelligence of the body actually knows how to connect with that real truth. And when it does, then some real deep healing occurs, and your expression of life becomes far greater. So the output of your life becomes far greater, and the fulfillment and the success and the happiness and the health and all that sort of stuff tends to take off quite substantially. So, and I can witness that by looking at the brain and seeing how things change in the neurophysiology, when we connect with that truth. And I wouldn't say that I understand exactly how that's happening. Again, that's part of those things that perhaps is beyond my level of conscious understanding in this moment. But I can witness and evidence and see what's changing in the physical body as a result of when we set that intention to just align with universal truth. And it's quite profound.
Oh my gosh, there's so many questions I want to ask about this. I'm like, okay, where do I start? So I want to go back a little bit to miracles.
Yep.
You said you almost always see miracles happen, except there's sometimes you don't. And it's often when the brain blocks it because somebody's not ready to receive it. I was wondering, do you feel that people have to necessarily believe in miracles to be ready? Or could they maybe not, maybe they, they've had their hopes up so many times, so they're a little unsure. They don't want to put all their hope out on the line, but do you see situations like that where the miracle still happens because they're still ready unconsciously?
Yeah, look, we're a complex species, and so there's a complex number of reasons as to why that doesn't happen. The ones you touched on are they're all valid. So yeah, when people feel like they're perhaps being making themselves vulnerable, too vulnerable, and they can't allow themselves to feel that vulnerable if they surrender to the process, because yeah, if they feel like they've been let down too many times, they've been in a condition of dysfunction or pain for a long period of time, and then someone says, hey, look, if you just let go and go with this, everything can come good. And then and what that could feel like is, well, hang on, if I allow myself to hope for this and then it doesn't happen, that's it. I've just given up all hope, and then I'm gone. So you know what? It'd be a lot safer if I just stay where I am. But I mean, again, that's a limiting belief. So that's just that's a false consciousness that we have set up. So there's no, you're not giving up your hope to just believe in something. You might just open a door that shows you 25 other options that you actually have available to you. But the biggest one for me that I see, and the way that I explain this to people, is if you look at the brain and you look at evolution, the brain's number one priority is always survival. So survival of the organism and then survival of the species. And that's the hierarchy. That's the way it works. So the brain will do everything it possibly can to keep you safe and ensure your survival, and then ensure the survival of the species. Now, the way that it does that is that the brain is a prediction organ. So it needs to predict everything. Another big consideration in this to just touch on quickly is the fact that the brain demands a huge amount of energy from the body. So it metabolizes something like 20% of the total energy consumption of the body, but it only weighs about 2% of the total body mass. So it's got huge energy demands on the body. And if you're going to get the brain to start predicting and calculating and actually computing what's going on around it, then the energy demands go up. And if the energy demands go up, then the brain remembers evolution, and it kind of knows, quote unquote, it knows that its survival chances are potentially impacted, because if it starts burning up too much energy, that cuts down the amount of available time it has left to go out and hunt and find food and refuel. And if it computes too much, uses too much energy, and you run out of energy, well, then you potentially die. So it's not gonna easily allow you to go into that space where it's just going to calculate new things. It just wants to run from automated programs all the time. So, and again, the way it runs those automated programs is from having a fixed framework of beliefs and a fixed framework of rules around life and around its engagement with the environment and with others around it. So all of those rules, that framework of rules, that's your subconscious belief. That's a matrix of subconscious beliefs that you hold within your mind. And so the brain looks at that fixed framework, that matrix of beliefs, those rules that govern all the subconscious programs that allow it to just automate the process and run on autopilot. And when someone like myself steps in and says, okay, right, we're looking at this complex dysfunction, it's probably going to take us one session to resolve everything here. And the person looks at that and says, hang on a minute, I'm going to need to step outside my reality. Like that is a long way outside what I believe to be possible. What's going on in that person's brain is the brain is looking at that and saying, hang on a minute, if I go with this, I'm going to have to let go of these rules and this framework of rules. And there's going to be a period of time where I can't keep you safe because I don't know what the rules are. If I don't know what the rules are, I can't predict what dangers could be around the corner. That's an unsafe place for us. So I'm going to start sending you some visceral feedback that just makes you feel really uncomfortable in this moment, makes you shake your head, makes you think like, this isn't where I need to be, and I'm out. And so I see that a lot. So I find myself these days spending anywhere from sort of 5 to 15 minutes with people just chatting at the start of that first session, just to kind of break down that process so they understand it and then they don't block it. And I think that's probably one of the most impactful things that I actually do is I actually just try and open people's awareness to the fact that they will block their own miracle. And their brain is doing that because it thinks it's trying to keep them safe, and keeping them safe means keeping them in that condition that they're trying to get out of. Because the brain knows it knows what's coming, it knows what's around the corner, even though it might be pain and dysfunction and you consciously don't want that. It's habitual, and habitual is a safe place for the brain to be.
I love this explanation. I love it. I love your explanation of how someone blocks a miracle. I love how you said if I let go of if I let go to allow the miracle, that means I have to let go of the rules. And if I let go of the rules, then I can't keep you safe. And then if I can't keep you safe, that's so awesome and so true. And so I guess when you're working with people, I mean, you figured out a system now to kind of help them overcome this block. When you're working with people, what are you seeing as the core issues? Is there a theme? Like, do people come to you for just body pain, or is it sometimes they want to elevate something, or is it emotional stuff? What are you seeing, and what are you seeing as the core issues underneath what you see on the surface?
Oh, a big question. So again, comes back to it. We're a complex species, and so there's any number of issues that come up. And look, I think there are some big. I would say there's some big ticket items that come up that when they come up, they're going to be somewhere very close to the top of the stack for people. So the things, when you say core issues, it's usually a cascade of things, and we'll kind of be guided to wherever the cause of an issue is, and there'll be a pathway towards breaking it down. And we're not just, this is where, so I guess probably one of the shortcomings with medical science, or like the Western medical paradigm, is that it looks at the body as a collection of parts, and a collection of parts that you can take apart and even remove some parts, and the body's not a collection of parts. Like it's a whole, and then it's not just the physical body. There's these other three dimensions as well that that is you. The words that you sometimes hear healers and other spiritual types say, you are not in your physical body. Like, your physical body is in you. And again, that was something I experienced resistance around when I first heard those words. And then the more I went into it, I was like, actually, that's really true. Okay. And it just sometimes takes a little while for awareness to shift around that. But I think, I've always said that, it's all about being able to get to the cause of an issue. And something that I used to explain to clients all the time when we're just working at the level of the brain and the nervous system is, it became apparent to me very early on that we were really only limited by my awareness as a practitioner. And so anything that was within my awareness as a practitioner, we could influence and we could change. And so and then at that point, the athletic mindset kicked in. It's like, well, if I just get dedicated about expanding my awareness, we're going to be able to influence and change a whole lot of stuff. So that's a huge thing. So I guess now my awareness is a long way expanded from where it was 5 or 6 years ago. So the big things that I see that come up very often is one thing that I think people relate to is something that's called negative energy thought forms. Now, a negative energy thought form is essentially a negative thought or a limiting belief that has kind of just been with you long enough, or it's been intense enough that it's taken on an energy of its own. And so it's taken on kind of a level of consciousness of its own. And people will experience that as that negative little voice that says, you can't do this, or no, actually, you know what, you don't deserve that, or, no, there needs to be worry, and there needs to be struggle in this. This can't be that easy, And so those little voices, those little words that have taken on a consciousness of their own, it's difficult to get a result in the body when you have those negative energy thought forms, or you have those limiting beliefs that are kind of underpinning a dysfunction or underpinning an experience of life. And so I'll find that those things tend to come up early on in a process as some of the first things that we need to block, that we need to clear. Another thing that is really huge, hugely impactful, and is kind of rife. The more that I've gone into it, and the deeper that I've understood it, the more I find it comes up in people and closer to the top of the stack, so to speak, is ancestral trauma. So ancestral trauma, and specifically ancestral identification. And I find this a fascinating topic to go into. Now, when we talk from the level of the brain and the physical body, or the scientific understanding, ancestral trauma is something that science now understands and acknowledges. So it actually acknowledges it as a thing. And again, science has done what it needs to do to fit that information inside the scientific box. So it's been evidenced, and ancestral trauma has been, evidenced and seen and traced via sperm back, say, from the current generation, going back about 5 generations. So science has seen it, and they can say, look, it exists, and we think it's being passed down through DNA via the father's sperm. And yes, that's one way that it passes. But again, when we look at the truth of it, there's just more, and there is no limit to how far it can go back. It can literally, energetically speaking, can just go back thousands and thousands of years. Now, an ancestral trauma is essentially you will have a trauma charge, so a bioelectric charge in your system, which will then correlate to or manifest itself as a physical dysfunction. So you'll have some level of physical dysfunction, and that may be pain, it may be in the movement system, it could be panic attacks, it could be emotions that you experience, but you'll experience some visceral sensation or some physical sensation. An ancestral identification is something much stronger. And so an ancestral identification is when you are identified with an ancestor, and that means that part of their consciousness is with you. So part of the consciousness, and specifically the trauma of their consciousness, or the trauma affected part of their consciousness, is with you, which means you are expressing their traumatic stress response, or you are experiencing their traumatic stress behavior. And you won't know that. All you'll know is yourself, because we look at the self and we think that's all that there is. So, I've got these behaviors that I just can't shake, or I've got this anxiety or this stress or this depression and I just can't shake it, or I've got these suicidal thoughts and there's no rhyme or reason as to where they come from, but they couldn't be coming anywhere else other than me, because there is only me. And that's the belief we have. But the truth of the matter very, very often is that it's not just you in there. It's actually the consciousness of the ancestor that's expressing itself through you. And trauma doesn't disappear at death. Trauma, in one way to say it, is that trauma it's too big to be resolved in one lifetime, or just too big to be looked at and faced in the trauma affected individual's lifetime. It just passes into the family system, and it just passes down the line until somebody steps up to heal it. And then that's when we're looking at quantum healing. So trauma healing via quantum processes. And when you then connect with the ancestor, or with the consciousness of that ancestor, then you can heal the trauma, and that heals it in them, it heals it in you, and magically things just disappear. And what you get to experience for the first time is you get to experience just yourself, and just you being who you are. And then there's a process of understanding who you actually are, because you've been living your whole life sharing an experience with a family member, with an ancestor. And so that is something, as you can imagine from that description, if you had, the consciousness of a trauma affected ancestor kind of occupying your space for the entirety of your life, that's no small thing. So when you clear that and you just get to be you, well, that's a huge shift. That's a huge thing. So that is something that comes up. I see that a lot. That comes up close to the top of the stack as well.
Oh, that's so crazy. And it feels, I wonder, in your opinion, is this something that somebody really has to live with or clear? Or do you feel like there's ways that people can take healing in their own hands? Because I've been doing a brain retraining program, and I've just witnessed miracles in its own, regard through brain retraining, which is, it seems very much like what you're talking about. We're rewiring our brain. We're rewiring those old, subconscious beliefs that don't actually serve us. We're rewiring those negative energy thought forms. But I wonder how that correlates if somebody actually is holding this, like you said, ancestral trauma.
Mm. I don't believe that the way that I work with people is the only way that you can clear these things. I think that the way that I work with things will be perfect for some individuals, and those individuals will hopefully find me. But there have to be any number of other ways that you could potentially do this. I don't know of a whole heap that do it, I guess, as wholly and completely. I just know how I go about it. But one really important factor is looking at the human organism from DNA and our epigenetic capabilities. So we have a ridiculous percentage of what scientists used to term junk DNA, and it's sort of anywhere up to as high as 98.5% of our DNA is what science used to call junk DNA. Now, that so-called junk DNA is just DNA that is available to be activated to adapt to a certain environment or a certain emotional stimulus or a certain trauma. So we are the most adaptable mammal on the planet. So we have this incredible capacity to be able to adapt and change ourselves. And in part, that's kind of how that's one way to explain how trauma can be, like these traumatic responses can be so strong and can be passed on, because when you experience a stress, well, the body tries to adapt as best it can to that, and so it will adapt itself to a stress response. But on the flip side of that, from healing, and when you're trying to empower yourself and you're looking to try and clear yourself, heal yourself, and heal potentially family members and others of these traumas, you have this incredible ability to be able to adapt and literally rewire yourself. So I don't doubt that via that process of self-empowerment and learning and expanding your own awareness, that you can't shift, at the very least, a large part of these traumas. And I think through that process, what generally tends to happen is, as your awareness expands, you begin to see and understand potentially where your limitations are, or just where it's going to be more efficient to call someone in who's going to be able to just, move a few things for you in one session or two sessions. And you might go from one practitioner for a session, and then go back into self work and self healing, and then you're kind of your intuition takes you somewhere else to get a little bit of help. But I think that's something that expands in people as they go into this process, because as they adapt and they improve themselves in terms of literally healing and kind of up-leveling their function, up-leveling their cognition and their higher level function, your intuition can improve, and you just begin to know, you begin to understand where you need to be and what you need to do. So I don't doubt that just via that process that you'd be able to shift a huge amount on your own. And then there's probably going to be moments where you would just have an awareness that, you know what, I think I just need to investigate this particular modality, and you'll be able to sort of streamline your own process and get through it probably, a whole lot quicker than a lot of people who just commit to one particular modality and just stay there hoping for a result.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. So regarding the negative energy thought forms and how you were saying that what you often do is kind of help people clear these. Does that mean that they're literally just gone after, or do people actually need to walk away after they work with you and still integrate some level of self-healing work and in order to keep those negative patterns away, or do they come creeping back in? How does that show up?
So again, it depends. There'll always be, so in the work that I do, there'll always be, we can clear those negative energy thought forms, you can clear the limiting beliefs, and you can clear the negative thoughts and the negative self-image and all of that sort of stuff. At some point, you're going to need to replace it with something. At some point, you're going to need to replace it with some high-level function, and so some high-level beliefs that are going to write some high-level programs that are then going to express a far higher level or high-level expression of life. And that's always part of the process. And that can actually be really simple. You can actually have sort of just a couple of really impactful deep beliefs that just write a whole heap of different programs for this person around the life that they're wanting to have. And so that's generally, that will almost certainly always be part of a process when we're clearing those things. But it does rely on the individual. You do need to kind of go away and live that, embody that, and experience that. And so with the different levels of mind, I always say to people, we have one mind. We just have one mind, but our system of looking at things, and because again, like we touched on earlier, we like to try and break things down, and we want to try and understand things. So we try and systemize things, and we've broken the mind up into a subconscious division, a conscious division, and then there'll be a whole bunch of people that aren't aware of the fact that we have a superconscious mind as well. And so we've got these three divisions of mind. Now, the subconscious is where all of those beliefs exist. So all those beliefs that create that matrix of beliefs that create the framework of rules for the subconscious programs that govern our behaviors and choices and our emotions and stress responses and all of that good stuff. That all exists in the subconscious space, and that is roughly 95% of your total brain processing. Your conscious mind, which is amazing, that's the most highly evolved part of the brain. We look at that generally as the prefrontal cortex, and that is kind of what makes it's the most magnificent, highly evolved part of the brain, but it's only 5% of the total brain processing. That's that's only a small part, but it remembers the habit. It will remember, in the absence of those negative energy thought forms and in the absence of those limiting beliefs, when you experience what was a previously stressful stimulus, or you experience a person who used to previously sort of dampen your self-confidence or make you feel less than yourself, when you've removed those limiting beliefs and those negative energy thought forms, and you no longer look at yourself, or you no longer feel sort of down or bad about yourself, but you encounter that person who previously triggered that in you, and that stress response isn't there, the conscious mind will be searching for something, because you don't have, if you haven't put a new program in, then you won't have an automated response set up. You won't have a new behavior set up around how you react in that situation. And in the absence of anything, the brain will look for habit, because that's easiest. It will look to just run a program rather than compute, for those whole reasons of conserving energy and energy efficiency, as we touched on earlier. The brain will then just look for a program that it can execute. And so the conscious mind will kind of think, well, hang on, I don't know what to do here, but I've got a program for this, and it includes me feeling less than myself, or it includes me being aggressive, or it includes me being, having a specific stress response, because I remember that. I remember what I used to do in these situations. So I'll just do that, and you can find yourself just falling back into habit. So it is an important thing to have a new belief, something to go to, and then to give the conscious mind an opportunity to connect with that. And that's kind of the work that people need to do. Is kind of, I call them small action steps, and just allow the conscious mind to connect with the new beliefs, the new programs that you put in. And when the conscious mind can see that, then the brain kind of relaxes, because it knows, there's an automated program, and the conscious mind can see the new program and think like, okay, that's right. Yeah, there's that new program, right? No, I can get on board with that. That's okay. And then we're fine. Then we just roll on, and life improves.
I love this. It almost feels like it's an accelerated version of what I've been doing with the brain retraining, because I'm breaking down, through my own work, letting go of old beliefs and replacing them with new ones. It's noticing every negative thought and being consciously aware to redirect those thoughts to something positive instead. But it almost feels like what you're doing is kind of helping to escalate the process, in a sense of helping clear that space, so then we just put in the positive thought that we want to be the habit.
Yeah, it's the brain. The brain is amazing. That's the mind is absolutely limitless. And if we just this is what we were saying before, if we just align with that, what's actually true, the universal truth, which is that limitlessness, and we just kind of get out of our own way, that limitlessness can just take over, and the speed of things is absolutely phenomenal. So I explain it to people in this context. I haven't actually been to a Tony Robbins seminar, but I've seen YouTube clips and social media clips and everything, and there always seems to be a lot of energy in the room. There's a lot of people jumping up and down, and there's noise and shouting, and people are really saying that there's massive motivation, and we're going to have big dedication, and we're going to go out and we're going to change the world, or we're going to change our lives, and it's all around that energy. And I think, in that scenario, I think that's right, because at that point, all you're accessing is that 5%. You're accessing the conscious mind. So when you've got the conscious mind, you need massive motivation, you need huge dedication, and you can't afford to put a foot wrong, because the subconscious mind still holds on to the habit. And what you're doing via your massive action and your motivation is you're just producing conscious actions that are hopefully over time going to overwhelm the subconscious to the point that it just gets on board with these new programs. And so you just can't afford to put a foot wrong. So it's a challenging process, and it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of individuals aren't able to do it, because it just takes a level of dedication that's beyond most people. And so the people that can actually do it, I think you end up seeing them on goldcast.com, and there's these inspiring stories of these amazing individuals who've gone and done these amazing things literally just with the conscious mind and being dedicated. The way that I describe it is, imagine if you're going to plant a tree. So where you are, you guys have oak trees over there in the States. Oak trees are a pretty big tree, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so an oak tree is a big tree, but it starts from a tiny little seed. So if you're going to go and grow a massive oak tree, you start with a tiny little seed, you plant you plant that in the ground. You just make a small hole, plant that in the ground, cover it over, and you kind of walk away. And nature does all the hard work. Like, nature's going to provide the sunshine. It's going to provide all the nutrients from the soil. It's going to provide all of the physical mass, that's all the molecular mass that's going to grow this enormous tree that might be 50 meters or more high. And really all you need to do is just come back and water it once a day. So that little seed is the seed kernel of thought. If we can plant the right seed kernel of thought in the mind, in the right place and kind of at the right time, life will just take care of all the heavy lifting for us, and the subconscious mind will create the behaviors and create the reactions that'll just carry us to where we want to go. All we need to do is just come back and allow the conscious mind to connect with it. So we just need to water that belief kind of once a day, and amazing things can happen. So we can kind of take the work right out of things if we just unleash the mind, let it do what it knows how to do, rather than us trying to force the mind to do what we understand that it does. And so I think that's probably my thing, is just kind of try and get out of the way and just really stand back and appreciate how amazing the mind is, and just let it do what it's supposed to, what it knows how to do.
Right, when it's not running from its conditioned response, conditioned
exactly.
behavior. So this is a good segue into asking this question. If you, like the work you sound like, it sounds like the work you do is amazing, but if you had somebody who couldn't afford you or couldn't afford to go to somebody who does the kind of work you do, how would you guide them into taking the next steps for them to still be empowered to create change themselves?
Yes. Okay. So this is something, again, I touch on this a lot of times, because I have a lot of people who reach out, ask for help, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't feel right, or they just, they want to go it on their own. And I think that's beautiful. So it depends on the condition. It depends on what they're looking for. But if we're talking about beliefs and mind, and we're talking about limiting beliefs just not giving us the expression of life that we're desiring, then where we can connect with that is through meditation. And so I advise for people to begin kind of a meditation journey, or just begin a meditation practice. And you can start with little guided meditations. You can start with heart rate coherence. So the Heart Math Institute is a wonderful resource to dive into. And you can start with these little 3-minute, 5-minute, 8-minute meditations, and you can connect the heart and the brain. And when you cohere the heart and the brain, then you remove entropy from the body, and so the body begins to communicate, and then you can actually get that guidance, that intuitive guidance from the heart, and the brain can understand that. So it's an incredible thing to understand that the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, and that didn't fit within our classic understanding of how the body worked for a long time. So the classic understanding was that the brain was the master control center. And if it's the master control center, then everywhere in the body should be receiving more information from the brain than the other way around. But the heart has its own brain, and the heart kind of just knows. So for me, that's the first step. If you can find stillness, which is what we find in meditation, stillness is where you can connect with truth. And in stillness, if you can then make sure that you have coherence in the body, well, then you'll have that access to the guidance and the intuition that is available to all of us. So that's a really simple place to start. And then you just begin to place your conscious attention on it. If you can place your conscious attention on that which you're seeking, which is truth. So you might just have a little mantra, which could be a question of like, what's the truth of this situation? Or what serves my highest good in this situation? Or what is it that I need to do that progresses me along the path towards my highest purpose? Or what is it that I need to do in this moment that serves my greatest healing? So you might have one question that you just use to garner your attention. And so you can use that question, place your attention on your situation, get still, allow yourself to connect with the truth. And that truth may not come to you consciously. It may take time for you to understand it. But as soon as you place your attention on it, the answer will be there. The information will be there. And if we know that, we can accept that, then your body will be responding to that. And you don't have to consciously be aware of that or feel anything. You can just allow that to happen. And this is exactly what happened to me working within applied movement neurology and then working in this space. When I first started working as a practitioner, I started getting all of this strange feedback that I was feeling in my body from the people that I was working with. And it was way outside the confines of my reality. So the reality that I had set up at that point did not include me being able to feel other people's pain or other people's visceral sensations, and it really scared me. And I really wanted to do this work. I thought that I thought that I should be able to be good at it, but I wasn't prepared for that, and I was scared that I might get cancer or some disease or some dysfunction that I didn't want, and I had no control over. And I kind of took a step back from that and just thought, you know what? I don't understand what's going on, but I'm just going to treat this like every other thing that we do when we're trying to train the brain. I'm just going to place my attention on it, because if I place my attention on it, at some point my brain is going to understand that, and then at some point down the track after that, that information and that understanding is going to filter into my conscious awareness. And once I have conscious awareness of it, then I'll be able to work with it and do what I need to do with it. And that's exactly what happened. And that is exactly what you can do when you have that heart-brain coherence and you just place your attention on it. So you place your attention on the answer that you're looking for. So you place your attention by making a question. You set your intention to just follow that guidance, whether you know what it is or not. And then that's what will be happening below your conscious level of awareness in the body. And then at some point down the track, that limited little 5% that we have in the prefrontal cortex will catch up, and it will start to understand it. And then we call that intuition, and we call that understanding. And so you can actually start training your own intuition, and you just need to be prepared for the fact that you might experience no conscious feedback for a little while. I love the words of Anadea Judith, who said, I remember her saying, start a conversation with your higher self. And she said, if you want to connect with your higher self, start a conversation, start a regular dialogue and a regular conversation. And it might be a one-way conversation for a while, but at some point you'll get an answer back. And that's that in more esoteric spiritual terms, she's describing the exact same process that I'm just describing via conscious attention, intention, and heart-brain coherence. So and again, that's that for me. That's that bridge, being able to be in that space where we can just put a language to it that people can kind of accept and go, okay, right. So if there's something in the brain and the heart, and I can accept that, okay. And then before they know it, they're actually connecting with some truth, and dysfunctions are starting to dissolve, and their life's improving.
Yeah. And I think what happens, unfortunately, sometimes is, there might be someone like, no, I tried that, it didn't work. And I think a lot of us just kind of quit too soon. We don't stay on the path of that one-way communication long enough while we're waiting for that other, the guidance. And also, in my experience, sometimes it doesn't come the way you think it should, like
Exactly.
We're talking about communicating with higher consciousness here. So it's not like it's just going to, you're not going to hear this loud, distinct voice of the opposite sex or, whatever sex you imagine talking to. I mean, maybe that's how it comes through to some people, but it's not the way it's always going to express itself. It might show up in so many different ways. It might communicate in ways that, unless we're really aware and trusting and looking for it, kind of like you said, having the intention of the trust to be aware of it and notice it and hear it.
Yeah, it will be however is actually truly perfect for you, but that doesn't mean it will be exactly how you project that you would like it to be for you.
Right.
So I've always said, I look at guys like Anthony William, the medical medium, and I look at what he's doing and I think he's amazing, and I look and I think we're probably healing people on a similar kind of level, but he does it via food, and he's always had this auditory guidance, which I think is amazing. And for me, that's just not my frequency. I've looked at food and I've looked at nutrition and everything, and every time I've kind of gone there, my guidance has been, not for you. It's not your thing.
Yeah.
You can heal people via the brain and via intention and all of this stuff, and you can do amazing things in that space. But if you try and go with food, it's just not your frequency. So, okay, so he can do that with, and I've always said with him, with his auditory guidance, I was wanting that and just desperate to have that for the longest time. And I used to say all the time, like, that'd be a lot easier if you could just have a voice talking to you, telling you this stuff. That'd be a lot easier. But that's for whatever reason, that's just not where my intuition or where my guidance is kind of meant to come from. So it's just sort of sitting back and just allowing what's actually true and what's right for you to be, and it'll be whatever it's meant to be, and if we can sort of just step back and allow that, well, then we can get the most out of it and it'll be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you work with all sorts of people, from whether it's people trying to upgrade their kind of mindsets or people who have chronic pain and illness. And you even work with athletes who want to upgrade, don't you?
Yeah, I've always said, so basically, if you're going to be the brain guy, then basically the minimum qualification to do work with me is that you need to have a brain. And then if you've got one of those, well, then we can do something with you. So and that's basically it. Like, it doesn't matter what level that your brain is functioning at. Like, if you are dealing with a complex dysfunction or a disease, well, the brain's going to be involved in mediating that presentation and mediating that experience of life, and we'll need to work with that. If you are already an athlete and you're sort of at the Olympic level, well, you're looking for that last hundredth of a second, and is there some level of limiting belief in your system that is just holding you back from that last little 0.5%? And almost always there will be, and it might be, wherever you're held back. It could be in the neurophysiology, it could be literally in an energetic dimension, who knows, but there's always a higher expression. So it doesn't really, the starting point doesn't matter. The end point for each of us should be the same, which is our highest possible expression, and it's just we start from wherever we're at, and that's it. Then we just progress from there, and it's whatever's right for the individual. I've got people who come to me and they're just looking for healing. They just want to get out of pain. And we're like, okay, we can just do that. And then a lot of people, come to me with nothing apparently wrong. They don't experience anything. There's nothing acute or dramatic in their life that's wrong. But there's a vague sense that their life just isn't what it could be or should be. And then when we go into things, there's just a bunch of things. There's a bunch of beliefs that we need to shift, and we just need to take the handbrakes off. And again, take the handbrakes off, amazing things can happen. So the starting point is just meet people wherever they're at, and then the end point is hopefully your highest expression of life. And that's just, if you're prepared to just be on the journey, well, then you'll get there.
I love that. The starting point is wherever you are at, and then the end point is your highest possible expression of yourself. Beautiful. Very well said. So, when it comes to, it's interesting because what really drew me to you initially, I love the work that you're putting out regarding just showing the potency and the power behind the brain, because especially when you get into kind of athletics, you see, especially in the fitness world, you're just seeing so much. I mean, obviously there's an emphasis on the body, but I love that you're always showing us that that your brain also needs to be upgraded, in order, you talk a lot about, you brought up a lot about, just various things like foam rolling and accessing mobility, and how, we might be able to stretch and foam roll for, if we're like, and what I try to work with people on is, if you're doing this over and over and over, and it takes you hours every single day, all the time, and maybe you get some shifts, but then you go right back, I don't know that life should be that complicated that you have to foam roll and stretch for 3 hours a day, every day, to be mobile, So what's your take on that?
Well, yeah. Well, then I think my take on it is that's just sort of people staying within their conscious level of awareness. As in, I've been told that there's these self-release devices and they're good. I don't really know much about them, but I see other people rolling on them, and I think I'm supposed to sort of go and sit on a spiky ball, and stick that into my backside, and that should make magically make the muscle sort of release. And if I roll up and down on this roller over these lumps on my thigh, then that should make the pain in my knee go away. That's just conscious level of awareness, where people have sort of been told one thing. And yeah, if the pattern is repeating and not going away, then it means that there's something in the system, something deeper in the system that's not being addressed, that needs to be shifted, because that pattern is just recreating itself every time you come out. And so, yeah, basically we need to sort of, again, it comes back to search for truth. Go and keep asking the questions. What's causing this? What do I need to do? What's the truth of this situation? Who would I need to see? What information would I need within my awareness to actually resolve this? And again, they sound like they're just sort of far out questions, but the truth and the answer will always be there. And if we're prepared to allow ourselves to, get still by that process we talked about earlier, then we can find that. And you might be guided to one modality. You might be guided to do your self-release work a different way. It can be whatever it needs to be. For me, it's scan the body, localize to wherever the root cause of the issue is, normalize that cause, potentially upgrade it, or just upgrade it and that neutralizes the cause in one go, and then function changes. But I'm very, very aware that, something like fascia, there's always, fascia is such a complex tissue. It's an amazing tissue, and it just holds so much information. And you can't, it's like the liver. You can't study it and what it does from cadavers, because it just completely dehydrates and changes its makeup as soon as the life leaves the physical body. So it's difficult to understand from cadaver studies. Like it's a tissue that works via electricity. So you can't dissect it and then put it under a microscope and look at what chemicals are, what electrochemical, what neurotransmitters or chemical communication might have been going on in there to try and understand it, because there are only electrical signals that were actually making it work, and that electricity has disappeared once life is no longer in the body. So our understanding of fascia from that classical sense, I think, is in that, I'd throw that in that basket of false consciousness, and so you could say, when you see people rolling up and down, as you pointed out, over and over and over again, producing the same result, and literally just recreating Einstein's definition of insanity, that's false consciousness kind of playing out in action. There's kind of no truth there. You can change things for the short term, and you can, increase a little bit of range of movement, so you might be able to go and do your exercise. But as you pointed out, the tightness or the soreness or the stiffness, if it just comes back, then you're not addressing the truth of it. You're not addressing the deepest thing.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I can only speak to it because I've been that person until I got to a point where I started asking the questions. It started feeling to me like, no, it's just not supposed to be this complicated. I shouldn't need to do all of this work from just a purely physical perspective. Like, my body is more brilliantly made and designed to be way more resilient,
Yeah, I was that person too, and you know what? For me, I just had it was a big moment, just a shift in awareness, and it was very early on when I had started working with the brain and whatnot already, and I thought I had some really, really good techniques. I knew how to work with the muscle spindles, and I knew how to work with the Golgi tendon organs that all help to maintain tension within the muscle system. And there are specific techniques that you can employ, rolling on foam rollers and self-release devices, that will give you more of the result that you desire, but they still don't necessarily address the cause. So I did this course, and it was all about measuring movement and quantifying movement, so that you can quantify in your patient or in your client exactly what movement and range they have available, and then you can quantify for them afterwards the change that they've gotten. And it was all about getting objective data. And so this guy got us to do, interestingly, he got us to pair up and say, do a calf muscle, and foam roll one calf muscle, get your partner to massage the other. And then we did one with the spine, where it was, do your very best rolling and self-release technique on the spine. And we're going to measure the change and measure the difference. And the thing that he wanted to point out to us was that this was a group of, higher level practitioners. It was all physios, chiros, osteos, exercise physiologists, and people who should really know what they were doing. And we all fell within sort of the parameters of what he was predicting, which was that about 70% of people in the room would get tighter trying to self-release. And that's exactly what happened. And I was, using these special neurological protocols, and my range of movement improved marginally, not a huge amount, but it improved. And then afterwards, at the end of that, he said, okay, guys, great. You've got your marks now. You can see what you've done. You've either tightened up or you've got a little bit of a release, but it's about that 70-30 split. And we're going to go have lunch. Just go have lunch. Come back in about 20 minutes and we'll see you then. And then first thing when we came back, he said, oh, guys, just jump on the rock. Just go and measure where your range is at. And every single one of us was back where we started, like 20 minutes later. So it was like, okay, that's a light bulb off, right? That's
absolutely.
What are we doing
huge
here? Yeah. So that was big. And I thought, okay, right. So these self-release tools, like, okay, I feel good for a few minutes. When I start my training session, I'm aware that I've got a range of movement increase, so I feel like I've done my job. But potentially by the end of the training session, that range of movement has, reduced. Maybe it's gone all the way back to where it was, and I'm potentially at a higher risk of injury. Maybe if I'm employing those same techniques as a practitioner, I'm high-fiving myself when I get my client off the table, but by the time they get out of their car at home, they're back where they started again. And look, if that's my business plan, then okay, maybe that's great. But for me, that's not where I want to be. So yeah, that was that. As soon as I saw that, it was okay. Things need to change. I need to really look at this and go deep on these things, kind of always.
Absolutely. Okay, so wow, I want to respect your time, so I want to wrap it up pretty quick here, but I want to ask one more just super simple question.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully I'll have a super simple answer.
Hopefully. Yeah. So in your opinion, through all the work you've done, through all these experiences like the one you just described, what percentage do you think that it's usually purely physical? And when I say it, I just mean like whether it's chronic tension, chronic tightness, chronic pain, chronic illness. What percentage of the time do you think it's purely physical?
Look, I would say now somewhere very close to zero. Yeah. And again, it all depends on your level of awareness. So when I was, let's say 5 years ago, so I was already a fair way into my journey into this field. I was still working predominantly with just the brain, and you're working with what we call efferent and afferent signaling. So an efferent signal is a top-down signal, so something that the brain is sending out to the body, and an afferent signal is a bottom-up signal, so a signal that the body is sending back up to the brain. And so we would work with efferent and afferent signals, and so that still happens. You can still find those, but there's kind of always something higher mediating it. If I want to work really quickly with someone, on the floor, or like if you want to work with an athlete because they're on the sideline for 2 minutes, then you can work with the body at the level of the spinal cord, and so that will be kind of more the level of the tissues. But if you want to actually try and resolve it so it doesn't come back, somewhere very close to 100% of the time, there's something deeper in the system that's mediating that. So I would say now that my awareness has expanded as far as it has, I can find that deeper cause, almost all the time. And if I can't find it, I'm more of the belief and the opinion that my awareness just hasn't expanded to the point that I can find whatever the cause is. So it just looks to me like the root cause of the problem is in the tissues itself. And then we're kind of back in that space where I was saying where I think like medical science is, basically if I only accept that there's the body and nothing else, then I can make an argument. I can make a case for the fact that, your cancerous disease has only come from DNA passed down to you from your parents. But if I'm prepared to look deeper and look at other dimensions and other possibilities, well, then we can look at that. There's a post I put out recently about parental relationships and them being an indicator for health in midlife. And there's an amazing study that probably people in healing modalities and energy work have probably been aware of for millennia. But there are some scientists that are actually starting to look at this stuff now, which is awesome. And this study was a 35-year study done at Harvard, and it was such a great little highlight because it identified that in 82% of the participants who took part in this 35-year study, 82% who identified that their relationship with their father was strained or cold, they ended up with a significant health challenge in midlife. So something along the lines of cancer, coronary heart disease, or hypertension, something like that. 91% of the participants who described their relationship with their mother as being cold or strained had a significant health condition in midlife, like cancer or something. And 100% of the people who described their relationship with both parents as being strained had cancer or coronary artery disease or hypertension in midlife. So it's a little bit of a slam dunk for the fact that there's something going on with these relationships with our parents. And what it is it's life force energy. It's our energetic relationship with the people who gave us life. And if we kind of block off that life force, well, then our health and our relationships and a whole bunch of other things suffer. But if I'm only going to consider the physical body, well, then I can make a case for the fact that it's DNA related, or that it must be because I smoked that I got lung cancer, or that it's some other indicator that I can draw a physical line to. But if we're prepared to look for more, then we can always find a deeper cause.
Absolutely. I love that study. That's crazy.
It's amazing.
100%.
It's an eye-opener, yes.
Wow. That's crazy. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So where can people find you, Scott?
So The Brain Guy on Instagram or Facebook, and then there's a Brain Guy website. I should be on LinkedIn. I'm still trying to get my head around that one. Instagram and Facebook, probably most active on Instagram, and then there's the website. But yeah, always available. So reach out
And
if you have questions after this. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, just for the listeners, if anyone's like, I'm curious, I want to know what this guy does. Do you do only in person or do you do distant work?
Yeah, so I work via Zoom, so I see people all over the world. So if you happen to be in Sydney, Australia, well, then I can do face-to-face. But yeah, the bulk majority of my work these days is online. So people just sort of reach out from wherever, and yeah, we can complete the session via Zoom. And there's not a lot that we can't affect. There's no real discernible difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with me today and for sharing all this wealth of knowledge and wisdom and giving people some just opportunities to expand their consciousness and, think above what they might have known to be true before this.
Listen, thank you for having me, and I'm really grateful to get to be in this space, and I love what you're doing, empowering individuals to take back their own power, because that's something that it took me a long time to understand, that turning your power over to somebody, outsourcing your power and giving it to a doctor who's just going to give you a pill. And I guess if I could leave you with this one thought, it would be that what I get to see every single day is that magnificence of the brain, the magnificence of the body, and you actually have everything that you need to heal within you. Like, you actually have all the answers. You have everything that you need. And really all I do is just help people get out of the way. So that's my elevator pitch, is that I just help get the old you out of the way so you can just get on with being your very best self. And that's basically what we do, because you know how to do that already. That you have it all. It's all there. So what you're doing in this space is absolutely awesome, helping people connect with that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. No, all right. Well, let's stay connected. And thanks again.
Thank you for the chat.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening and joining in today. I hope you all enjoyed the chat with Scott today. I feel like I learned so much even the second time I listened to this conversation. Scott truly is an expert on understanding just how incredibly brilliant and capable our brains and bodies really are. You can connect with him through the links listed in the show notes. And don't forget, if you have your own inspiring healing testimonial story that you want to share with the listeners and be a guest on the podcast, please reach out to me and let's have a conversation. You will find my email in the show notes, as well as you can DM me on Instagram anytime at ourpoweriswithin. And until next time, make this week great.